All right, so next up, we're going to begin our CSS Flexbox journey. You'll love it. Well, you might not, but you'll probably end up using Flexbox a lot. I do. It's just incredibly useful. So what is it? Well, Flexbox is a newer part of CSS, so it has not been around for very long at all. It's really only become pretty standardized across browsers in the last maybe 2 years, maybe 3 years. And it is a tool, or it's really a series of properties that we use to lay out items on our page in a box of content. So this is something we do all the time. We have some container and we want to distribute space inside of that container. How do we distribute that space? As an example, pay attention to this nav bar up here. There's some container, a nav element, or it might just be a div. Who knows what it actually is? I mean, we could look it up, but there's some container there. And then there's elements inside, and then there's space between them. And it's distributed between them. It's not quite evenly, right? You can see that as this moves down, as I shrink this down, these get closer and closer together. There's still space here around the input, the search field, and then eventually they start stacking. They go on top of each other. And then if I keep going, well, then they disappear, and that's done with JavaScript. Here's another example. Notice these three things right here. They're one on top of each other in a column. They're stacked. As I grow this, now they're not. Now they are in a row, and there's some space between them. Shrink it back down, no space, not horizontally at least, but they're in a column layout. Here's another example from Airbnb's website. Notice this little middle search input. I don't know what to call this, the main way that you find something on Airbnb. So there is a container here, just this entire container, all that space. And then we've got 5 different things in here, a button, and then 4 different inputs. And the space is not entirely divided evenly, right? This is larger than these, and they are larger than the button. So we could manually go in and say, make this thing, 500 pixels. This is 300, this is 300, this is 300, this is 150. But then we're hard coding those values in, and you might be on a really wide, long monitor. You might be on a smaller browser window. And if you look at what happens here, that's no longer, let's say it was 300 pixels here. I'm just totally making that up, but it's shrinking. But that space is still being shared, and there's some mechanism for deciding how much space or who gets the most space. And we can see that this input, the location field, gets the most space throughout, but that space does get eaten up eventually, and now they're even. So how does that all happen? Well, the main tool or mechanism is Flexbox. Further down, we've got these. Let's take a look at these right here. We've got 4 different images, little what do you call them? Captions below, and they're going to share some space. But as I shrink the screen down, they're sharing it differently, right? And now they're sharing it completely differently. They're all the same size. This is all over the place on websites. All of this here, all of this stuff, all of this stuff. As I shrink this down, they turn into a column, one on top of one another. They're sharing the space differently. It's being distributed in a different way. So that's the main concept of Flexbox. How do we, within one container, how do we distribute space across different elements to make those elements larger, or just add space in between those elements, move them to the left, to the right, split up the space evenly, make sure that the first thing gets more space or the middle thing gets the least amount of space. We can create flexible layouts. The boxes, the elements inside are flexing or flexible, right? This input, these guys, as I resized, they're not set in stone. Their sizes are flexing. And it's not even just a percentage. It's not always a percentage, at least, because you'll see that they change. It's not like this is always 25% and this is always, 30-something percent, because at some point, they're all even. So that box here is flexible. So that's enough of an overview with Flexbox. Let's actually dive into it. That's coming up next.